right. Hello, everyone. I'm Bryan Granger of the Halsey Institute, and welcome to our Artist Talk with Larson Shindelman on the occasion of their new exhibition called Geolocation, which is on view at the Halsey right now. I'm so happy you are able to join us tonight on our new live event platform called Halsey Live. Going forward, all of our public virtual events can be watched right here. So go ahead and bookmark this link. I know you all will have lots of engaging questions about the work, and we're happy to answer them. Just enter them right into the form right below this window, and we'll get to them at the end of the talk. I also want to thank our members. I know many of you are joining us tonight, and we really appreciate your support. If you're not a member and would like to keep or would you like to help us keep providing events and exhibitions just like this one, head on over to halsey.cofc.edu/join, and let's keep the fun going for everyone. So tonight, I'll be talking to the artists known as Larson Shindelman, consisting of Nate Larson and Marni Shindelman. They are two photographers who have been collaborating since 2007, but they've never lived in the same city. In 2009, they started a project called Geolocation, where they photographed the locations of real tweets. Works from this series, plus more work from their series called #Mobilize, are on view at the Halsey Institute. If you haven't seen the show yet, you can visit us Tuesday through Friday from 11 to 4 and until 7 p.m. on Thursdays. And don't forget your mask. If you can't make it to the gallery, you can also check out a virtual version of the show on the Halsey website. You can find that at the Geolocation exhibition page. And also, speaking of Twitter, for tonight only, since their works deal with Twitter, you can also submit questions via Twitter. Just at us. We are at Halsey Art, not at Halsey. That's a very famous pop star, but at Halsey Art. So to introduce our guests, Larson Shindelman have had solo shows at the George Eastman Museum in Rochester, New York, the Pictura Gallery in Indiana, the Orlando Museum of Art in Florida, the Lighthouse in Wolverhampton, Blue Sky in Portland, United Photo Industries in Brooklyn, and the Contemporary Arts Center in Las Vegas. They've also shown around the world and have done site-specific projects in places like the Dumbo Business Improvement District in New York City, the Indianapolis International Airport in Indiana, the Atlanta Celebrates Photography Festival, and the Digital Arts and Entertainment Laboratory in Georgia as well. They've also been artists in residence at the CEC Arts Link in Russia, Lightwork in Syracuse, and the Robert Rauschenberg Foundation in Florida. Man, they've really been busy. Please help me welcome Nate and Marni. Awesome. Thanks for being here, guys. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. Yeah.
I had to remember to unmute. So. Hey,
yeah, perfect. Exactly. Well, cool. Well, before we get to the talk tonight, I wanted to show you, we did have a very special visitor to the gallery today. I'm going to share my screen. Behind us.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
You guys
Speaking
keep it that
of Twitter,
cold, huh?
right? Yeah, exactly. It's very cold in the galleries. Speaking of, Twitter, this is all over Twitter these days. I guess if you're not aware, this is Senator Bernie Sanders sitting in a chair outside at the inauguration. Was very cold. The entire internet has taken this image, this lovely, delightful image, and posted it in all manners of locations. And now he's been to the Halsey as well. So we're happy about that. But yeah, anyways, so Nate and Marni. So I'll start this conversation with, let's start with how you guys came to meet each other and what made you want to start working together back in 2007.
So I don't know if you want me to go first, Marni, or
Go for it.
So sometime around 2003, I saw Marni give an awesome talk at the Society for Photographic Education, and we started getting to know each other after that, and we're friends for a long time. And then at a SB conference circa 2006, I'm guessing, I said, what would it look like if we made something together? And conveniently, I was doing a residency at Visual Studies Workshop the following year, and we started doing some things together. It initially started as sort of mail art back and forth, and then we went on some field trips and made some pictures, and it's been a beautiful partnership. So, you know, what is that, 14 years, something like that? We've been making things together. So
We're getting old.
Here's the 14 more. So.
Yeah, that's great. And so you guys have never lived in the same place, is that right?
Not for more than a month.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
so making art, it's funny, everything in Zoom land this is how our making process has looked for 15 years. You know, we're constantly Zooming, or we used to not use Zoom till now. Zoom is so much easier, but we're always having conference calls with people, galleries. You know, we're always working in Google Docs and trying to, you know, catch up with one another. So it's been a really funny thing to watch everyone kind of catch up to how we also work, and then also see some of the problems with the only real problem we have is signing art, as we always say. It's kind of a joke, which we just talked about earlier.
Yeah, exactly. And so when you typically work together, is it only for site-specific projects where you can get together and shoot in the same place, or do you ever shoot in different locations and work together virtually?
In the earlier days, we were shooting apart and doing a lot of back and forth, but these days, you know, we've been discussing a lot of ideas, and then we'll probably realize them as the site-specific projects. So we're always looking for residencies or hosts that might be willing to, you know, to bring us out, you know, to make some new work.
And it's always exciting. I mean, then we get to see each other. Sometimes we'll joke, you know, once in a blue moon, when we're traveling abroad, I'll be like, oh, see you in Charles de Gaulle Airport. I haven't seen you in 6 months or 3. And this is, I think, the longest we've been since out seeing each other. It's a really strange, we have these connections where we connect and we travel together, and we actually travel really well together. We've learned and have had some really fantastic and amazing adventures following the Twitterverse through the world.
And the pandemic's put a crimp in the travel, but we are still kicking ideas back and forth and starting to think about some new work. So I do think this time will be productive for us ultimately.
Wonderful. Cool. And so I want to start to talk about your geolocation project. So where was the sort of initial idea from that? Like, where did you kind of figure out that tweets have this metadata in them and that you could use that in your work?
So we started, Nate and I had been making work for a couple of years together, as he said, and we were making work about surveillance and connecting across distance. And this is before either of us had an iPhone. Nate was an early adopter, so he had one very early, but this is before, you know, iPhones came out and we kind of were using them in our pockets. And we were like, what would it be like if how could we survey each other? So we started projects about distance. And Nate lived in Chicago at the time, and I have family, my family was in Chicago, so I would visit them. And one day we always, when we get together, we kind of both work from this way where we have repositories and we kind of call it ping ponging. So sometimes one of us will almost whisper to the other, like, hey, I found this, I don't know what to do with it. And then the other will take it and run. And so I had these mashups it was Yahoo Mashups. It was this really just small website. And it's basically a way of mashing up code people were doing for fun. And I had these two, I was like, tweets have locations and people are mapping it. And I think for Chicago, we had 3 or 5. So for the entire city, with all of Twitter turned on. But this was instantaneous, basically. It was, you know, we could get it, we could see it instantaneously. We had to print it or screenshot it. And so we went that day and we had this, and I don't remember what we were making that day, but we made this one photograph, and you'll see it, or you can bring it up, Ryan. It's the one with that has a person kind of in the corner, or Nate can also. And we made this one photograph. Yeah. And it was kind of this moment where we realized, oh, there's something about this, that everything we've wanted to think about, which is surveillance and the modern day age, this photograph, it's this one. And it was right, we made this photograph and it felt very important to us. And we stood on that corner for a few hours. We didn't know what to do. We were making videos, we were doing all sorts of things. And all of a sudden, something about the photograph and the tweet just came together and kind of stopped us in our tracks.
Yeah, I should also mention that this is right when the recession was getting really bad in 2009. So Bush in 2008 had signed the TARP legislation, but in early 2009, people were still losing their jobs. So the idea that somebody was like venting in this very public way and struggling, you know, with this really national thing, I think was really compelling for us. Like, it felt like a snapshot of that moment in time, in addition to a snapshot of this person's experience, you know, within that moment in time.
Yeah, for sure. And I think we'll get to this later, but I spent a little bit of time in Chicago and I saw those street names and I was like, that's definitely got to be Chicago. So I'm glad that my sneaking suspicions were right. But
it is one of the rare photographs that has a person in it. They're very rare. It might be the
exactly.
only one.
That's,
It's definitely the only one in the set of work you have. So
yeah, that's another question I was going to get to, but why don't we address that now? So yeah, this is the only photo where you see a figure or really any signs of life. I mean, I guess there's some other, you see cars and other things, but yeah, is that sort of a conscious decision to keep people out of these photos?
Well, we're always there after the fact. So we're not, photographing the moment of the tweet. We're photographing maybe 24 hours later, 48 hours later. So it never felt right to include people because we automatically want to link them. In this case, the person was fleeting enough that it felt like it suggested movement rather than an individual. But in general, I think we've tended to focus more on the space and the sort of emotional feeling, of being in the space. Like, what does it feel like to be there? What does it feel like to stand in that space? Maybe it allows you to project yourself into the tweet. Like if you're there in the space feeling, what the person who tweeted was feeling, maybe it creates empathy, in that kind of way.
Yeah, and in these pandemic times, we see these odd photos of like New York City almost empty, and so these photos without people in them, they have this new resonance during this pandemic time. So it's kind of connects to that as well. And I don't know, for me, it has this eeriness, yeah, where we're kind of being in a space where there aren't other people. Is that ever something you're trying to capture in these photos?
yeah, I think we've definitely been interested. I mean, our initial concepts and thinking about projects were just surveillance. Can you be less lonely in a time when we're hyper connected? When I can talk to my nephews, know me over FaceTime more than they see me in real life, or my family is far away, can you really know people through these devices? Was a question we asked very early on, and we're really happy it's kind of pulled through all this work, and it has that very empty feeling.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you linked it to those photographs in Wuhan in the early days of the pandemic. I found those photographs really unsettling, like of the empty city, right as the pandemic was really hitting stride, so to speak.
Yeah.
So I hadn't connected it in that way until you said that, but that's a really interesting linkage.
Yeah, and even I think the Burn Baby Burn, that one is another striking one because this is, I believe it's out west, right, in California. And it's just this this desolate painting. There's even not like a real parking lot. It's like looks like a side of a big box store or a factory.
Side of Walmart.
Of a Walmart, yeah. And
I like my Walmarts with a Western sunset on the side.
Exactly, yeah. And it's just so eerie. It's almost like an abstract, like minimalist painting. Is really, really fascinating. But yeah, and then so looking at Twitter, are there what makes a good tweet to shoot? Particularly in these earlier geolocation works. Was there something that you were looking for, or was it just when you saw it, you knew that it would work?
Well, I think initially we were just looking for tweets that moved us, that made us feel something, whether it was intellectual or emotional, I think was up for debate. We started doing the project about 2 years in. We started doing it as a site-specific project when we got invited to England to make a set as part of a festival there. And I think that also shifted us towards thinking about it as a site-specific portrait of a community. And that also governed the selection of tweets in some ways, like thinking about like, how is this a record of the community? How is this a record of the lives that are lived here, or the lived experiences, or the people, that make up this place? So that became part of it too. It also becomes an exercise in filtering noise, because these days there's a lot of tweets and there's a lot of bots. Like every city seems to have a bot that just tweets the time and temperature, which is sort of a quaint holdover, from an earlier time. But we're not particularly interested in photographing the time and temperature, outside of a radio station or, whoever's doing that. And also job recruitment sites tend to geotag their tweets for some reason. So we see a lot of job postings and, that kind of thing. So I think a lot of it comes down to us, filtering through all of that. And depending how many there are to filter through, like sometimes it's a more extensive process than others. But ultimately, we're looking for ones that are funny, that make us laugh, that reflect something about the time, that have a sense of a historical record, or something, that sort of links it to contemporary experience, in this place.
Yeah, for sure. And I
we
know
read through.
Okay.
I was just going to say, we read through thousands at times when we're on site. When we're, if we're doing a hashtag piece, like you'll see the difference between the two sets of work you have is one is based off a hashtag where we're actually able to pull from an archive of Twitter all the tweets from that location, and we'll use the same, but we won't do it by subject when we're going to just a location without using hashtags. And we'll read through. I mean, we have been lucky enough to pair up with a university that's archiving Twitter since the Library of Congress has been doing it, but not given there's no access or way to access that information. But we'll read through thousands of tweets, and some of them are entertaining moments, or we'll have tweet read-offs at night, and our tones are sometimes really funny. That's one of the things sometimes I forget, that we put our own intonation in the tweets, and they can be very vapid. There's a lot of Twitter, but there's always a moment where sometimes you're like, "Oh, that's sad," or "That's really funny," or "That's, oh, this really was happening at this time," and people are on their phones tweeting it, trying to get it to someone.
Yeah.
And it changes too sometimes when we're in the location. So the famous example that we talk about is the LOL, I think I just heard a gunshot tweet that's in the show, at the Halsey. And when I saw that tweet, I didn't think much of it in the spreadsheet form, but when I was in the site, there was something about the way the fog was rolling in over the water, in the shipping lane that just was really mysterious. And it gave a whole new intonation, like Marni is saying to it. Like it's something I initially read as very light and fluffy, didn't feel light or fluffy any longer.
Exactly. Yeah, this is, one of my, I love all the works, but really like this one. Yeah, just because there's so many layers to it. I think you mentioned to me, where this was taken. I don't know if you do that publicly, but
sure, yeah.
Okay, cool. And yeah, when you did that, I was like, oh, like, I thought maybe we were out in like the middle of the Pacific Ocean, on this like oil rig or whatever. And there's that like mystery behind it. And then you hear like this, oh, someone just heard a gunshot. Oh, but then like they got this LOL, so they're not like terribly concerned, about it. But this is a good example, I think, of one of those, or a good example of a work where the image doesn't necessarily sync up with the tweet, right away, as opposed to, other ones like the Money Pigs one, where the tweet reads, "Cars are nothing but money pigs," and it's just obviously someone just, hanging out at this auto body shop, waiting for their $400, maintenance to be done with or whatever. So, yeah, do you ever, get to the point where a tweet is, where it connects so well with its location that it's not worth shooting, or does that make it more interesting for you?
I mean, I think sometimes it's a moment where we kind of work as artists as opposed to we're really not documenting. We're artists still in the sense in the moment. Sometimes when they're too illustrative, it doesn't create anything, And this one, I love the hashtags. It's like hashtag hate it, waiting sucks, and I'm poor. And this one, these both were shot in New Brunswick, actually, St. John, New Brunswick. And if you go back to the other one, that LOL, this one, sometimes for me, it takes a while to look at images. And I go back, I tell my students always, if I think about a photograph overnight, it's kind of an A project. It's really successful. And this one, I always think about it in the end, that like, I think of the LOL where we just throw an LOL or an exclamation point on something really sad. Like I'll be like, "Oh, this sucks!" 3 exclamation points. I'm like, that's actually not appropriate in this time, And for me, that's what the photograph, why they're so incongruous. And the more I think about it, like, and we just kind of, Nate and I instinctively made the photograph, and you're just like, I don't know why, but I love it. And it takes a while to ruminate and sit. And the more I sit on this one, it's always that LOL. And I'm like, that's not funny. There's really nothing funny about it. So, and this one also was in New Brunswick.
Gotcha. Yeah, and so speaking of the place, I had a conversation with someone who came in the galleries last week, and they were asking me, about the places, and they were saying that they generally have a good idea of, what a Western landscape looks like, what a Southern landscape looks like. But these, with these, it's just so much harder to process, and I think you kind of deliberately obscure, or it seems that you deliberately obscure, any signs of where the location may be. Is that what you're trying to do?
Well, we do make a choice not to include personal information. So if we photograph a house, we try not to give a street sign, or a house number, because our interest is not in doxing somebody, which is just an internet term for revealing somebody's real life identity online. We see it more as an anonymous tribute to an anonymous person, like somebody had this experience here, and they felt strongly enough about it to put this out, in the Twitterverse, so to speak. So we see our role as preserving, a small fragment of that. But I should point out it is a very small fragment of it. So for the whole project, we've shot somewhere in the ballpark of 900 photographs. And I think what's in the show is in the ballpark of 35. So it's a much smaller edit. And many of them we've shot and it's gone into our archive, but I don't know that we would show it publicly because it didn't have that right resonance, that Marni was talking about, between the tweet and the image, where it wasn't, the term I use is sticky, like it doesn't stay with you, in the same way. So we're always looking for those sticky ones, the ones that sort of follow you. And, as Marni said, if you're still thinking about it the next day, there's something to it.
I think they also don't show recognizable places. They're not purposely, and actually often we have included the locations. It depends on kind of how we're labeling it usually, but we actually have included, but what really, oh yeah, go ahead real quick.
In the book, we actually have an index. I'm just paging to the end. So if anybody is interested in picking up a copy of the book, it's got a little index in the back here where it lists all the locations, for all the pictures, and it became a way to sort of make location part of it, but maybe not the primary experience. Like we didn't want somebody to be like, oh, this is a California tweet. Oh, this is a New York tweet, like right off the bat. But, it is part of the record, and we do acknowledge, where they're located.
But the other reason you can't really specifically or don't see any major like location things, like I think of the Space Needle in Seattle, or we haven't shot in Paris with the Eiffel Tower, is because most people are tweeting. Everything tweeted is like kind of very local, and it's very local. It's small. It's a really anonymous street corner. It's not usually the grandest place. You're not usually, I mean, there are lots of tweets probably under the Eiffel Tower, but the most profound ones and the most moments we're interested in are not 3 million selfies. We're interested. I always kind of say we're interested. When I go to New York and live, sometimes I'll live there for a month, and I've lived in huge apartment buildings, with 32 floors. And you just imagine that everyone's a tiny little box living their own little life in their own little box. And I grew up in suburban Atlanta, which is very much like that. Every house is its own individual. And so I think about that a lot with these tweets, is what we're bringing up is everyone's living their own little life. And, the saying is everyone can tell you a story that would cry, that would make you cry. And that's what we're kind of looking for, which is why you don't really see the grand, cityscapes, because they're actually generally not there. And we're often not in those grand cities. Although we have done a set in New York, and you can barely tell until you get really into like Tribeca and the fancy parts. It just could be any city in upstate.
Yeah, for sure. And talking about, some of the personal, these tweets, some of these tweets are so personal, like this one, which says Amy is dying, and they tag a hospital there, and you kind of see this house. I don't know if this was shot at the hospital or not, or they're just referencing it.
It's a photograph from the parking deck at the hospital. So we imagine somebody coming out to their car, after hearing this really challenging news about a loved one, and this might have been where they were looking, as they put this out in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, kind of building on that story, do you often kind of try to put yourself in the shoes of the tweet, the author of the tweet, and try to figure out what they were looking at or what they were seeing at the time?
Yeah, I think that's definitely part of our strategy, is going to the site. And I always imagine, that person. With the very first one that we talked about previously with the job loss, I imagine that person coming downstairs, smoking a cigarette, pulling out a BlackBerry at the time, and typing out this little missive to the world. So in my head, there's all these little embedded narratives, but of course it's speculative. All we have is the text itself, and everything else is interpretation. Well, I take that back. We have text, we have location coordinates, and then we speculate, based on that.
And this one is, that one is one of the first moments we realized that, like, when you read it, you were like, people are really putting information out there. And no one really knows why. If you're putting it out there to be cathartic, you're putting it out there to tell someone or to tell mysteries. or to keep kind of a story alive. And there's, people talk about like Facebook where you're just alluding to stories, people write these, I can't think of the word right now, but
Vague book.
vague booking, that's what it is, vague booking. But but there's people are putting it out there and it's full, and there's these moments that we pull them down, and we're trying to find these really sometimes tragic, sometimes not, but these poignant moments of this feed that is constantly ticking across us.
Yeah, and sort of, to not only sad tweets, but I really like this one where we can see this roller coaster off in the distance, and the tweet reads, "I am doing really good. I have not chickened out on no ride. I know somebody who would be so proud of me." And it's, you just can't help but smile when reading that and thinking about, this person being on the roller coaster. So yeah, it's. Oh, go ahead, Marni.
I was gonna say that's a good Atlanta. That's some of these ring true to you. If this is Atlanta Six Flags, I have no interest in roller coasters in my life. So, and I grew up in Atlanta, and I remember everyone being so excited to go to Six Flags. And I drove there to make this photograph. I was like, wow, Six Flags is it's not really pretty. And as a kid, it was this magical place you would go. I was like, and I have no interest in riding roller coasters.
Yeah.
So sometimes you have more kind of personal moments with them, and all the trash. I mean, there's so much trash.
Yeah.
Littered as people walk into Six Flags.
Yeah, for sure. This is a beautiful photograph, and it almost, you think of Six Flags as this sort of grand theme park, but this is like, maybe the back entrance or something. I don't, I'm not sure, but it, seeing the trash sort of in the foreground and all this overgrowth almost makes you think of like an abandoned theme park. So I really like how that showed up here, but also combined with the tweet, where someone knows someone who's going to be so proud of them.
It's also fun sometimes when you get to show the work back. Like now that when we started this project, I was up in Rochester, Nate was in Chicago, and we both have moved since, and now I'm relocated back outside of Atlanta in Athens. And it's fun to bring the work back. Like this was just on a trip traveling to Atlanta, but for me to travel back and to be like, we all, I think in this area know Six Flags Atlanta. It was the big theme park, and it's really not at all as you return as an adult.
Yeah, for sure. I think I've been there once. I grew up in Greenville, South Carolina, about 2.5 hours from Atlanta. And yeah, I remember going down there with friends and riding all the roller coasters as well. So
you didn't chicken out like me.
No, I think it took some getting used to, but I ended up making it. But yeah, and so I also wanted to talk about, there's a video on view at the Halsey, and this is a video that you made for the George Eastman Museum for the #Mobilize project, which we'll touch on in a second. But this video, which also can be viewed on YouTube, it's also linked to at the exhibition page at the Halsey website. But yeah, I really enjoyed watching it, and it's basically 20 minutes of you guys talking about your editing process, like while we're watching you do it, watching your screen. And it's really great, sort of like we're fly on a wall in your studio. And so, yeah, so in that, made me think a little bit. And one thing that you guys brought up is that you'll when you're in the same location, one of you will shoot in the morning and one will shoot at night. Is that sort of an effort to get sort of an interesting lighting in your photographs? Or is that just how you figure out your schedule?
I mean, it's a little column A and a little column B. In the early days of the project, we actually shot together with a tripod, and we'd make all the decisions together. But once we established a visual language, then it gave us more flexibility to be able to spread out and tag team a little bit. Marni's more of a morning person by nature. I'm more of a night person by nature. So, some of it naturally evolved along those lines, where maybe she would shoot in the morning. Midday, we'd talk about a few things. She'd take a nap. I'd go out and shoot. I'd come back and share some work with her. So it became just a rhythm, like we found a rhythm that worked well for the two of us.
That's exactly how it. I once had a friend of mine was teaching at NYU and asked about, she was making her students collaborate and asked them they were speed dating to collaborate. She was like, what are important questions you would think? And I was like, are you a morning or a night person? Because Nate and I, our circadian rhythms go like this. Like as I'm coming down, I'll wake up often, and both of us are aiming for the same thing, which is really empty scenes. So empty places, so I'll get up, when we were in Rochester, it was so early, I was getting up at 4:30 to catch the scene before the sunrise. So I can hit the traffic, and then I'll come back and Nate is 100% right. I'll take a nap, and then Nate wakes up, and Nate takes a while to get up and going, and I'm on the down end. And then we'll work together in that mid-afternoon light we don't really enjoy. And then Nate will be like, sweet, I'm going to go out now. And so we kind of have these paths, and it works for us so well with the work now. And it did take a long time to develop the language where you can't even tell it oftentimes who shot what. Generally, your best guess is going to be, if it's morning light, it's me, because Nate just doesn't wake up. And if it's night, there's no way I'm going out. It's too late. Anything past 6:30 is too late.
Yeah.
So.
But, there are certain visual parameters, we're always looking for square angles, with the edges of the picture plane, trying to have a formally composed, strong image. But I think that we've worked together so long at this point that Marni knows how I would shoot something, and I know how she would shoot something, and that's worked to our advantage too, that we could sort of negotiate, like what the collaborative aesthetic is. And I think you'll notice that the photographs, reflect that.
And also that video is, the video came out of the museum asking, oh, we really want to send our media people out to photograph you, to make a video while you shoot. And we're like, that's really boring. I mean, there's nothing really exciting about watching us. So we're like, hey, we don't dress up. We're trying to be as incognito. There's coffee, there's all sorts of like uninteresting moments. And I was like, well, what if we show this moment where we're actually, the real question people are asking, which is like, how do you make images that make and that work? And how can you tell a good image from a bad image? And you can see as we edit in there, it's an intuitive choice, and it's an intuitive language that we've trained ourselves in. And I've enjoyed showing it a lot to students and pushing people to be like, show this to your students. It's a really funny new take on a studio visit. So we also, Nate and I were in the really large Crystal Bridges museum show, State of the Art, a number of years ago. And they were running around doing studio visits, and they made a documentary film. And the curator and I have come to know the curator well. And he's like, oh, we would love to show you, but basically we have really boring studios. Like, this is my studio. It's super boring. It's a computer, 2 computer screens. And, so thinking about how do we show, we get left out all the time because of like, we don't have magical, amazing studios, but we have this funny thing on that where you watch us in Lightroom, totally editing with this funny banter, inside jokes. I think nothing got censored even, but like these moments where we come together, and it's really a fun, to me, it's become the most expressive part about, this is how we make, like, watch this. And I can watch all 20 minutes, which says a lot.
Yeah, well, whoever's sitting at the desk gets a nice 30-minute loop or whatever. If you guys,
our apologies.
Poor gallery sitter. Oh boy.
Exactly.
Pay them extra this month.
That's got to be the hardest part about video art in general. Right there.
Exactly. Well, you guys, it's not the worst thing that people have had to listen to over and over. So, by far.
Well, always striving to not be the worst.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, and speaking of, well, first of all, you mentioned this Crystal Bridges show, and I think that's where I think I saw your work for the first time, and when it was on tour in Savannah at the TEL Fair, the Jepson Center, I think. So that's cool. I remember it that long time ago. But and this working together, another concept you bring up is this idea of like mutual agreement to, you both shoot photos, but when you're editing them, and it has to be both of you agreeing on the final ones. And I guess, how did you kind of arrive at that? And I guess, what does it take to make you guys kind of both agree on a photograph?
I mean, I don't know that there's a secret sauce. It's just, we've worked together a long time at this point. Like, we tend to very quickly arrive at consensus. Like, it works. So I don't know that I have a magic bullet pointed checklist of like this, and then, it's approved, as much as, intuitively, like, we just know and tend to agree more than we disagree.
I think it's also a real mutual respect, and we both have learned. I've learned so much. This is a Nate love hour, but I've learned a lot about, working with other people and speaking your mind and picking your battles through, working with Nate, like love moments. And we rarely kind of butt heads, but if we do, we know that the other person is caring a lot about this, and that we need to find a solution where everyone feels comfortable, because we've also, in a collaborative, you're tying your professional reputation to someone else, so we always are kind of, it's like always like, oh, Nate and Marni, Nate, And if one of us, so we always are kind of making sure in that moment, and that is where a lot of collaboratives don't work or they fall apart, or they go kind of rogue. And we're lucky to have that. We also, I mean, we are both really funny people, so that really helps. But we do share a sense of humor.
Okay, I take it back. Humor is the secret sauce. Right.
Exactly.
Humor is definitely. I mean, and road tripping humor, and also having having some similar styles and some different. Like our travel style is hilariously the same. Like snacks and weird road trips.
Every roadside attraction we have to visit. So
nice. All right.
My favorite is the animatronic dinosaur roadside attraction in California, where the rubber was falling off of the frame. So it was like a robot dinosaur, like lunging slowly.
Wow. Oh man, I gotta put that on the list. That's
also,
actually,
Ponderosa outside of Shawnee, Ohio, not recommended. Just saying.
You mean like the Ponderosa restaurant? Like,
as a kid, it seemed so glamorous, but when we ate there when we were visiting, it was no good. No bueno.
No bueno.
That always happens, and I feel like Ponderosa. And I'm from Ohio originally, and I feel like Ponderosa had such like a good reputation when I was a kid. Like,
well, growing up in Indiana, it was the hot place to eat, but not so much as an adult in rural Ohio.
That's a great moment where you just say, we're going to let Nate needs to see that Ponderosa is not a great restaurant, but the salad bar is still fine.
Gotcha.
Hashtag sorry Ponderosa.
Exactly. Yeah. Not sure how these buffets are going to make it through this pandemic.
Can you get Ponderosa like DoorDash to you? I don't know. Now I have to find out.
Exactly.
Sorry. We should get back on track.
You pay by the pound. Yeah. No. But this is that humor that I'm sure comes out when you guys are editing and talking about photographs, right? Yeah. Anyways, so it's good enough segue, I guess, to the mobilize work. And so the story of this, you were commissioned by the George Eastman Museum to do a project, and then you came up with this idea to look at specific hashtags on Twitter. Where was the motivation to kind of focus your Twitter search onto specific hashtags?
So Marni talks a lot about the Arab Spring. I don't know how much you as the audience know about that, but Twitter was really instrumental in helping organizers during the Arab Spring come together and find each other. And at one point when the internet was turned off by the government, the CIA actually airdropped in internet nodes so that people could continue to connect. So we've been interested in that sort of way of organizing, people and ideas and social movements for a long time. And when the Eastman Museum reached out, we were there in summer 2018. And it was shortly, after a lot of the key incidents, like I'm thinking about, all the Black Lives Matter organizing that happened in that forum. I'm thinking about Ferguson. I live in Baltimore, so what happened with Freddie Gray was very fresh for me at that point in time. So we were thinking about the sort of idea of what's known as Black Twitter and how folks are finding each other, how they're organizing, how they're creating social pressure, to hopefully move things forward in this country. And I think that's been a really powerful force. So we wanted to capture a small snapshot of that and make a small historical record, of what that looked like in Rochester, how people were organizing, how people were talking, how we were hopefully making, social progress. So as Marni mentioned, we have a partnership with the University of Kentucky, and we had given them a list of about 30 hashtags that we were interested in, everything from Black Lives Matter to Say Her Name, to marriage equality, to Love is Love, and thinking about all the defining social issues, of our time. And then based on that set of hashtags, we got a spreadsheet back with a lot of tweets happening in Rochester for about a 6-year period of time. And then based on that, we winnowed our way through. At one point, we dropped them on a map and realized that hundreds of them would come from the same location, for example, there'd be one particularly very active user. But then it became, a way of filtering through and thinking about what people in Rochester were thinking about, in regards to these movements, in regards to social progress, in thinking about how to represent these issues, and in thinking about how to move these issues forward. So for me, that was the really key thing, right? Is that it gives people a platform and a way to organize and a way to build a foundation around these issues and a way to reframe the issue too, to make it accessible, to the public, and also a way to build public opinion. So that became our sort of defining way of thinking about it, is like, how is this shaping public opinion? How is this moving things forward? How is this moving the conversation forward? How is this a record of Rochester, in this moment in time? And I think that the resulting set is really powerful. We also made a deliberate decision not to include any hate-based information, because we did see a lot of really awful white supremacist tweets responding to these things, and we did not want to give that a platform. And I think, as we've seen now that our former president has been deplatformed, deplatforming works, right? It changes the tenor of the public conversation. So we were thinking about consciously how we put forward these ideas that can contribute, to the platform. And then it wasn't on us to promote ideas, that are counter to progress. So we, in some sense, deplatformed, anything related to white supremacy and hate, at least in our project.
There's also a moment, thinking holistically, because you kind of have the retrospective and the newer work of the show in our career, where when you have a platform, at first we were very shy of making very strong political statements, and we were making statements about Twitter, but people are always like, is Twitter good or bad? And we, the work is much more complicated than that, but we came to a really conscious point at this show. We'd been in talks for a number of years about what it was that really wanted to make a show that to us felt more meaningful with what these tiny insignificant things could be, and so we really wanted to work within some of our politics, and Nate and I both have a lot of community involvement, and it was for us exciting to marry that into the work. And we were at a point in our career where we can make those statements, and I think we're in positions of power, both of us as faculty and as more established artists, that we could begin to make those and speak for people that kind of couldn't. So it was really important for us to kind of start showing our cards a little more in the work. And it became more interesting for us too. Reinvigorated us into the project.
Nice. Yeah, that's really great.
We're curious too, moving forward, to continue those conversations. Something we've been talking about lately is how Parler, for example, can no longer find a home on mainstream servers and app stores. So we're curious about all of those things. I'm not arguing that all of that is good. I don't agree, to be clear, with the things that Parler was doing, but I'm cautious about the ability of big tech to just unilaterally decide. So I think that those kinds of issues will continue to move us forward too. Thinking about what are the roles and responsibilities, of participating in a community. What are the roles and responsibilities of being a platform, for other people's ideas. And I don't know exactly what form that'll take for us, but I think we'll continue to think through those evolutions.
Yeah, great. And I want to just share some of the images from the Mobilize series. In this one, the tweet says, "I genuinely wish I was in Times Square protesting my heart out today, hashtag Black Lives Matter." And you can see they're sort of in this suburban commercial area. And a similar one here. Again, I think looks like some nice morning light. But then, a lot of these are, very residential areas. And there's one, the Haunting Shadow. There's a beautiful work, and it's, very rural area. The tweet reads, hashtag All Lives Matter, but it's not all lives that still live in a haunting shadow of history's recent social transgressions. So hashtag Black Lives Matter. And it's just, this beautiful illustration of maybe the utopian, dreams that, that Twitter or social media can, help with, that people can be connected to these, people can add their voice to specific movements and protests, no matter where they are. And so, so I think these works, for me, they do a great job in showing that, you can add your voice to these movements no matter where you are. And
this one's one of the saddest for me. This one, because we actually had spent days reading, Nate and I read through thousands of Me Too, Black Lives Matter, Say Her Name, all these tweets, and reading through them was, after you read through the bots, because there are a lot of bots always, it was really hard to read. A lot of particularly Me Too had a lot of, people were using Me Too as a confessional hashtag. And it was a
Yeah.
really hard hashtag to read through. So this
Yeah.
one was, it's like, I'm so sorry. Like, what do you do on the other end of it?
And it also spurred a conversation about justice with us too, right? Like if somebody has had a Me Too experience happen, to them, like what's the right path forward? How do we hold people accountable as a society, for bad behavior? And at this moment in time, there was a lot of things being released about, public figures that were behaving in really bad, really inappropriate, really gross ways. We don't have the answers as artists, but we felt like it's important to be a mirror, for that conversation.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, and you mentioned, this idea of deplatforming and taking sort of the negativity away from Twitter. And then there's this big backlash, as people are equating someone's ability to use Twitter as a service with, a constitutional First Amendment right. And, I've just been thinking about this a lot in the last couple of weeks where, Twitter has kind of been assumed to be this like public square, but really it's a corporation that, when you tweet something that you like some, product, or if you tweet some hashtag, like now advertisers can use that, pay Twitter to use that data, so essentially with each tweet, you're, helping a company, make more profit, and yeah, so these are big, complex issues. And, I agree with you, there's, no place for hate or incitement of violence or anything on these platforms, but who should, be the one to regulate this. And yeah, and so there are a lot of interesting,
And
interesting
what's
things
the
to think about.
process, by which they regulate it? Because that's maddeningly opaque as to, how these platforms for 5 years decided to do nothing or to put a warning on certain tweets, but did not remove them. So why now?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
how is this the moment, right? Like
Exactly.
for me, the moment was when our former president tweeted, how did he put it? When the looting starts, the shooting starts. Like that was the
Exactly.
moment that they should have, stepped in. So what changed? And it's clear that these companies are looking at the political winds and making decisions accordingly. And that does not feel like a good process that's in the public interest, as much as I happen to agree with the decision this one time.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, just because he was, 2 weeks away from not being president anymore. I'm sure that had a big
Well,
factor.
I'm sure they're worried about future regulation, right? Now that different political parties in power. And
Exactly.
if that's how we make decisions about something that many people think about, like we think about a utility or a public square, so if Twitter is a utility, like the light company, shouldn't that be governed by a public body, that has accountability? Because right now, Jack Dorsey does not have accountability. Jack Dorsey being the CEO of Twitter, like he can do as he pleases, as the CEO of a public company. He's accountable to his shareholders, but, he has no general public accountability.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that has crossed my mind in recent days as well, this idea of some sort of, nationalized or national, public forum, online, right? I guess the way that with this capitalist society, the internet sort of just developed because companies were willing to, do stuff that would make them money, so.
Sure. But the internet originally started by the military, paid for by public dollars, right? As a decentralized network to communicate. So, one could argue that their success is only possible because of public investment. And
absolutely.
Therefore, I think that they should have some accountability to the public. I don't know what that looks like. I'm, sure that there are smarter people than us, that have laid out a treatise of what that looks like. But I do think it's an important conversation, and I'm happy to highlight it where I can.
Yeah.
Well, and also to kind of circle back around to the work a little, thinking back just 5-7 years ago when people saw the work, they'd be like, wait, my phone tracks me? And you're like, yes, it is perfectly legal. Your phone is tracking you. Everyone's tracking you. So to get back into the initial questions of surveillance and how that surveillance under private, these are companies we're paying, they're not public. So there is public surveillance also, but all those kind of tie back up.
And there's a lot of layers to our project that way too, in terms of people opting in or opting out of services, right? Like when we sign up for Twitter, we agree to terms of service. when we started the project, there was a checkbox that said location, and it was hidden in the settings, and you had to opt out of it when we started the project. Now you have to opt into it, but we frequently wonder if people mean to do it every time, or if they just sort of set it and forget it. And then that's a concern too, that all that data is now in the hands of corporations, that their stated goal is to sell your data to advertisers, to be able to fuel their growth, right?
Exactly.
So I'm not saying that folks shouldn't do it, but I do hope that the work provokes a conversation where people realize that they're making intentional choices, and hopefully, make informed choices.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and this is sort of a this, I don't know, I love this work here because the tweet goes, "These tweets have my location." So they're finally, realizing, exactly what you're saying, that, there is more data in here.
That's I believe you put that as the punchline to the show. We either put it at the beginning or the end. It's got one place. You're either let in on the joke, not the joke, but let in at the beginning or at the end, and you're like, oh crap, all these. So.
Exactly. Yeah, we've got it at the end of the show here.
In my mind, this is somebody that just got a new phone and they're digging through their settings, trying to figure it out. And
while standing in front of an orange tree.
This is an agricultural farm in Southern California, so I imagine that it's a farm worker, but I don't know for 100% sure.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it's fascinating. Yeah, I think it's this idea of I think, or for my experience in particular, is like, oh, like the internet is so great, like I'm going to sign up for all these services. Yeah, and then you start to realize that, Facebook knows, Facebook probably knows me better than I know me, or
I don't remember the attribution on this, but somebody said that if you don't know what the product is for the website, the product is you, and I think that's entirely true.
Exactly. Yeah, we've all got data, that we're in control of, and we're just giving it away, I guess, for free, right? And other people are making money on it. But
I mean, I always say when people get really worried about that, I'm like, well, we like our power, and the power company knows when I'm home. They've always known. They've never hidden that they know when I'm home, because I turn on the lights and their rates go up, and not the rates go, but all of a sudden my meter's spinning. So it's, to get too trapped is difficult, but to be conscious is extremely important.
And to be clear, I'm not advocating that we all live off grid in a cabin in the mountains somewhere. So,
just for a few weeks at a time.
But informed decisions are important, right? And informed consent is important. So
yeah, for sure. Well, I think we do have a few questions here. First of all, we did have a question about the catalog. So is there a way that people can buy your book?
We actually have.
So if people go to larsonshindelman.com, this beautiful hardcover book is available for purchase. We're down to the last few copies. It's officially sold out through all the distribution channels. So it's our last ones that we held back as artists, but we're happy to to send those out to folks if you order one through our website. I will say that it comes from us. It doesn't come from a big company. So give us a few days, be patient. And who knows if the post office is caught up from from the holidays. So
they're a day behind still.
We're people, not corporations. So be patient, but we're happy to put one in your collections.
Yeah, please. And we'll shoot your link out on our social media, and it's on our website as well, so you can find it there as well. Another question is from a professor at CFC. I have students that ask a simple question. It seems that you had a difference of cameras. I guess they're referring to both the geolocation and the mobilized works. So they're asking, what did you use for each set of works? Did you use the same camera?
We have an evolution of cameras.
We've been making this work since 2009, and there's been an evolution of cameras over that time. I think we've had, between the two of us, a lot of different cameras. So in the early days, they weren't so great, and you can see some of that in the image quality, but it's also just part of the evolution of the project. So, maybe it speaks to that. The more recent work is shot with the Sony A7R Mark II, which is a really, really wonderful camera. It's currently on the Mark IV, so maybe it's time for us to upgrade, but that's how these things go.
Yeah, old trusty. All right. I think that's it. Although let me fire up the Twitter feed. Do we get any tweets? I don't think so.
You have to read Twitter now, Bryan.
Exactly. Yeah, I know. I'm not the best at it. I'm just searching for @HalseyArt, and not much is coming up. All right. Well, I'm assuming that we got tons of mentions, but I'm not sure how to use it. Yeah. So, anyways, yeah. Unless you guys have any other things you wanted to add.
I mean, I think we continuously like to thank you guys for. I was talking to Bryan before. It's a wonderful show. It's exciting to get it out. We shipped the work in December, not expecting how timely it might be with Twitter, and 2 weeks ago the coup attempt. So it keeps becoming, reinventing itself, and we hope that it gets the students into the community there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, cool. Well, thank you guys. Yeah, again,
thank you, Bryan. Thank you, Halsey.
Thank you.
Yeah, our pleasure.
Thank you, Halsey donors that made it possible.
Exactly. Yeah. We'll take the recording of that and send it out again. But no. But yeah, many thanks to you, Nate and Marni, for joining us tonight and sharing your work with us. And yeah, and so for our audience, as a reminder, their show is on view at the Halsey until March 5th. And you can visit us again Tuesday through Friday, 11 to 4 and until 7 p.m. on Thursdays. And again, be sure to mask up and help observe our COVID-19 protocols. Got to keep it safe for everyone. And as a side note, our next live virtual event will be a conversation with Scott Reinhardt. And he produces graphics and maps for the New York Times. We'll be talking to him about his work during the pandemic, during the pandemic, but also during the election as well, and how he uses graphic design to help us make sense of the abstract data around us. So that'll be in 2 weeks from today, which will be Thursday, February 4th at 7 p.m. right here on Halsey Live. So yeah, that's it for today. So thanks again to Nate and Marni, and hope to see a bunch of people in the gallery soon.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, we'll talk to you later.
Take care, y'all. Stay safe.
Yeah.
Yeah, bye.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Bryan.